down.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is the fourth Meet Your Delegate meeting. My name's Peyton. I'm Pros 11, one of the two governance facilitators here at MakerDAO. Long for Wisdom was the one doing the other delegate meetings, so we'll try to keep the quality just as good on this one. I'm joined today by MakerMan, who's here to basically give his platform as a recognized delegate, and a bunch of other awesome maker people who might have questions on what that platform consists of. So I guess to kind of get us started and guide away for any questionings, I will turn the floor over to MakerMan here, and you can say as brief or as long as you want to kind of tell the people what you're about and why you're seeking to be a recognized delegate.
Great. Thanks, Peyton. So, I joined, and you can look at my delegate platform on the forums. I'm pretty much following that. So there isn't going to be much different there. I started in Maker, and this is in theirs, in 2019, November, just as they were flipping from the single collateral die to the multi-collateral die. And so, I came with questions about liquidity and, ideas and sort of came into the forums pretty solidly and threw out a fair amount of ideas. There's a lot of posts and a lot of ideas, but for me, the basic issue was kind of looking at the system from all the stakeholders' point of view. And then I'm big on sustainable and scalable systems. So I'm really big on sustainability. So if you do something, you want it to last into the future and not just be a flash in the pan, and of course with Maker and everything that's online, you want it to be secure, right? And then my other big thing is using data to drive goals, right? I mean, somebody has an idea and they want to do something. It's like, you can try and do things, but if you don't have data, you're just kind of guessing. And so those are my big things. That kind of, me looking at stakeholders and stuff. I mean, I was around during Black Thursday and was sitting and watching going, when are we going to emergency shut down the system as we were, throwing out zero bid ETH, and everybody just kind of, sat. And then after, or even as the event was going on, I'm sitting here and I'm like, all these vault holders are like losing ETH. I mean, for nothing. The system gets nothing, they get nothing. And I realized there's going to be a lot of pent up energy on this. And so I started a forum thread, and this is just me sort of thinking about the system from lots of different people, not just the people working the system and doing it as a job, but the DAI holders, the vault owners, the DeFi ecosystem that's using the DAI. And so, it's kind of my big deal. And then it seems like Maker's kind of using me as an advertisement because, we made $1 billion. I mean, I watched Maker go from 150 million down to under 100 million on Black Thursday and then eat 6 million and have to struggle to kind of recover from that. And then here we are, like, a year and a half, 2 years later, year and a half, and we're 6 billion and pushing, so I see the next logical step as 1 trillion. And the real question is, how do you get there? Because I do the analysis on this, and it's like, unless crypto becomes 100 trillion, Maker getting, 1 to 5%, of, it has like 1, maybe 2% of Ethereum and 10% of USDC and like 10% of, or a good, close to 10% of Bitcoin, that it's like, where do you get it from? And then how do you do this in a way that's kind of secure for everybody and grows the ecosystem? Because the way you get from 2.2 trillion right now, which is pretty much all crypto, I mean, hardly any of that's real world assets, is to bring on real world assets and other stuff. Somehow we have to grow, and it can't just be by organic money growth pouring into crypto. That'd be great for everybody, but I just don't see that as the real path forward to diversification, portfolio strategy. And my big ideas, and I've pushed these before and not gotten a lot of traction, is that, I looked at what happened with DAI in the ecosystem, and, we were pushing a high peg. A lot of people were arbitraging that or, trading that. And, we did the PSM. It's like, I don't know, different people will credit me with the idea with PSM, because I was the one that suggested we use USDC as an emergency measure to back DAI during Black Thursday, because we had nothing else. And so, it's just trying to look forward in terms of how we do things. One of the things I wanted to, once compound came online, and that was the farming was the reason why die peg went so high. I was kind of like, let's raise rates and throw some of our die that we're getting into these farming solutions so we can chew on the return, chew them down. But everybody's like, no, we got to mint more die. Okay. And I think we should compete there. I think we should do a maker our reward, and use that as another kind of vehicle to communicate with vault holders and potentially to give negative rates should we ever need it in the future. We had a real struggle and debate over how we would do negative rates or whether we could do it. It's a viable vehicle for many reasons to compete and to create a new economic circle and cycle, as well as a thing, right? I mean, maker's worth money. We can make maker our worth money too. So, there's that. And then I just kind of happen to, look at the ideas and comment on them. And generally, I look at things from an analysis side that I'm looking at the whole economy and the system in general. And I'm trying to understand how whatever's being proposed can actually work or what it means to the risk in the system and die. And so that's kind of where I'm coming from. And with Maker, it's always been a struggle. Maker can really consume time, and I hope someday we can get compensation for delegates. People working the system should be compensated reasonably, and this system really requires a lot of headspace and power and difference of opinion, honestly. Different people with different views, different backgrounds to help kind of grow this system to that 1 trillion, because I don't see really any other way that we can get kind of, I wouldn't say a world bank, but kind of a world currency that's completely transparent. I mean, Maker is completely blockchain transparent, and DAI isn't, it represents a claim on collateral. And there's no other currency that's kind of like that. I mean, we can debate it and discuss it, and maybe there's some things out there. But when you look at the landscape of the world of countries printing their currency and, what is it a claim on? I mean, dollars used to be backed by gold and silver. Well, guess what? DAI is actually backed by collateral. And that can be the kind of new meme for the future where we don't just get to 1 trillion, we get to 100 trillion and become the dominant player in the space. And then there's a lot of possibilities of that as that happens. And I see that can happen. And I'd like to be a part of it, and be here to help make that happen. So that's kind of my platform. I'm going to turn it over for questions and discussion, but that's the basic deal. And that's where I'm coming from. And I hope I can solicit some of the maker players out there to put some weight behind me so that I can have some weight with my views and have people listen and maybe get some things done. So I'm going to leave it there.
Excellent. Appreciate you giving us that rundown. For people here in the meeting, I have posted the delegate platform, forgetting the word there, sorry, in our chat. We'll try to make sure that gets included on video descriptions and forum write-ups as well. But yeah, as MakerMan said, we're going to open it up to general questions here. I've got a list of ones I can pull from. Should there be a lull, but I definitely want to open it up to the people attending here first. So if you have something, feel free to take it away, and I'm happy to read it off from the chat as well if you don't have a mic or otherwise can't ask it yourself.
I think they're all blown away out there.
I'll go ahead and start us with a question.
Hey, Seth.
Hey, MakerMan. Thank you for taking the time to do this, first of all.
Sure.
I really like what you have to say about keeping an eye towards both microcosms and macrocosms and all of the different stakeholders in the world of MakerDAO. And I'm curious, like, as you kind of look at this top level, are there any areas where you see weaknesses that you're particularly concerned about?
I see this as a general DAO thing, which is related to quality of work or, basically people contributing to the DAO and either getting compensated too much or too little, right? And how that can burn people out or make it so that they get so much they can just walk away, right? It's like, how do you make a DAO sustainable, right? So the microcosm of the DAO is how that evolves. It's a real dynamic space right now, and people are approaching it. I really wanted to finish my work rewards thing because I have a completely different model that can encompass all the different models that I want to unveil, but I have not had time to do it. There's too many things going on in my life to throw that one out. And then I threw out two other ones. This was in one hive. I haven't really pulled them over because Maker is actually uniquely suited to this. I think DAO networks is kind of going to be the new future, which is where one DAO basically cross invests into another DAO, right? And the DAOs are actually the unsibleable entity that can really band together in groups. I mean, you can't just make a website and a token. I mean, you can throw a lot of this stuff up, but you can't really make a real community and a real dynamic ecosystem, then that you can then build into a DAO network, right? And so, one of the ideas I had that I haven't really thrown at Maker is this idea of a DAO network and how you cross invest and then share talent and actually build treasuries that cross invest into these other DAOs and stuff. So, it's really a larger space, which is how do you build sustainable value in conjunction, that's the macrocosm and DeFi, and then even the greater space of traditional finance, right? And then the microcosm of like, how do you nurture and sustain the individuals within the communities in terms of sort of right, sustainable, just, fair, rewards. These are all tricky topics. They're all very deep topics. So I think they're all important. I think it's a tough space. And I hope I can some point, get to a point where I can finish my work rewards and kind of show you guys or show the world, unless someone else finds it first. And I've spent 30 years searching for this, and blockchain was a key requirement to make it happen. And I think I've got a possible, it's just a way to think about what work is. And once you wrap your head around that or understand the idea, you can get the rest of it really easily. And I'm kind of protecting it because I feel like it has value, but I don't know how to reap that value. And I also want to finish it, so because I think it's important. And at some point, either somebody's going to find it or I'm going to reveal it. But that's, I see those as all important topics. And that's why, I go micro to macrocosm because I have a tendency, it's just my thing that you can look very myopically at one thing, like the people in the space or something, or just what Maker does. But if you don't look at what Maker's doing in DeFi or traditional finance in terms of growing, you kind of miss the bigger picture, and Maker could just go away if you miss these pictures. Or if you don't pay attention to the microcosm, you can have your people go away and just go somewhere else. And you can't have that. Maker's an important piece of this, and we kind of want to keep this together and leverage our positives and diminish our negatives so that we can become the major player. We're already one of the major players, but to be the major player with DAI in the space. That's all I got.
Thank you. Yeah, very impressed with that answer. I totally hear you. I think that's something I took away from ComDev. I thought ComDev did particularly well. I've seen a lot of similar programs in the space that suffer from, like, whenever you put money out there and say, come get it, like, people will come, and you can quickly get into a situation where you have a lot of people trying to make really low effort contributions. And I thought ComDev did a really good job of sort of helping either just, say no to those or help people find places where they could create value. And so yeah, very much looking forward to this this new scheme that you're cooking up. That sounds like a
yeah, I know. I've talked about it, and everybody's like, "Where is it, you bastard?" And I'm like, it's sitting in my computer, waiting for me to finish the math and do the edge cases and make sure that what I'm going to present is going to work. So it's been 30 years. I'm like, what's more? One more year. I mean, I've literally traveled the world, and I've paid my dues in giving my time freely to other types of DAOs, intentional communities. It's sort of, there's another one that the name is slipping me right now, but just different groups of people that are trying to do things differently, and they have very real struggles on how they manage their internal funds and people contributing fairly, and how you bring people in, as well as how do you get rid of problem people, which is probably one of the biggest issues in DAOs. You can have, or even intentional communities, you can have one person that literally can just be so anti everything, but yet they think they're doing the right thing. So they're not malicious, but they just totally zap together. They just crush the energy of that community. And those are real hard issues, like when to know that you're just not being a positive contributor in the community and to move on, right? It's one of the hardest issues, both personally as well as for a community. And so I think all these are interesting things, and I've always been interested in this space, and I've spent a lot of personal time traveling to just see what other people were doing, and to get a handle on what are the issues by actually participating materially. And it was one of the reasons why I came to Makers. I thought it was an interesting space, and as I had time, I could contribute, right? And in the end, you really want that to become something material, so that you can spend your life doing something that's interesting and material, and also be compensated appropriately for it. And at some point I was just like, my wife was just, you're not getting anything from Maker, you're frustrated, you're upset, take a break, you know what I mean? And you're not being with us. It's like, why are you doing all this, taking time from us and getting nothing and getting frustrated? And so I see all these issues in a big way, and it's not a bitch. It's just kind of was my real space. And, so at some point I got burned out on Maker, and took a break, and kind of tried to do some other things, and got some ideas by doing that. So sometimes it's important to take those breaks, and it's important for a DAO to actually make room so that people can have that space. If Long for Wisdom gets totally beat up, that guy's so great. I want him to have 3 months off, or be able to do that, right? So that he can kind of recover and maybe come back. And if he's going to go somewhere else, well, then we have a model where other people can step up and he can move on, right? And they're just all interesting issues. So I will leave it there. My daughter, what are you doing?
Well, appreciate you making time to share these thoughts with us. Haven't seen any other question things. Your last response flew kind of close to something that was on our sheet, which is thinking about protocol expenses, right? As our revenues have dipped a little due to rates cuts and a few other factors, and we're onboarding more and more core units. Obviously, our expenses are quickly catching up with our revenues. So I was curious if you had any sort of philosophy as a delegate. Like, are there spendings that you feel should be prioritized? Like, should we be looking to spend on growth, for instance, or security, maintenance? Like, is there, I don't know, it's a hard question to
No,
list out correctly.
that's actually a good question, because every Maker's still kind of new, and it's definitely growing massively. One of the big things that I was pushing for a long time was a kind of treasury. I wanted to pull DAI out of the surplus and just set it aside, both as a secondary surplus, as a contingency for the primary surplus. So, the next time we had to eat 6 million, we could pull it out of the secondary surplus, right? Potentially. But then also to have that secondary surplus or treasury, or whatever you want to call it, be the thing that's there that basically is the expense pad, right? It's the money that you have, that when you make contracts, with your contractors, that they know that they're basically going to have income into the future, and I still stand behind that. I still, I was actually thinking about it today, about how our CUs actually could be our secondary buffers, that we do them right. They should actually build up cash so that they can kind of guarantee their salaries for at least their key people. And it's up to them to manage that. I'm willing to let them do that for a good chunk into the future, because there might be a point here where we got to go rate 0. And then we're going to have nothing coming in. And we better make sure that we got a way to pay these people. And in the end, the reality is I kind of want to segregate bonuses from salaries. Right now, the way the setup is they're coupled. And so we have a real expense that's huge when you think about adding Maker into salaries as a additional salary compensation thing. And like when you look at those numbers, I think we're very close to kind of tipping the scale here. It's like, what's prioritized? The key people, it's ultimately the CUs that I'm going to want to have manage their teams and dealing with the money. And inherently it's operations first. I mean, you literally got to have people around who are watching the system. You don't have to grow when you don't have revenue, because if we're SF0, growing doesn't mean anything unless you get SF on that, right? You got to get fees. Otherwise, your growth is just time and productivity that's eaten for nothing. Now you could go, well, it's future growth, sure. But, what to prioritize? It's like I always come down on operations. If you got to pull in, you pull in on kind of the growth side, and you basically make sure that you're flat covered one way or another, by hook or by crook. Even if we have to sell Maker, that we got to make sure our operations are covered and that things are secure. And then, the other side is you really do want to grow, but also you need to bank that surplus, because the way I see Maker runs is it runs hot and then it runs cold. And so somehow you got to figure out a straight line trajectory through that. It's kind of like any operational system. You're going to have abundances and deficits, and you need to figure out how to manage those. And the key issue is just right now, we're kind of everything from the foundation is being lumped on the decentralized DAO side. And so what we're seeing is the expenses really come up. And I've been requesting a report from the foundation forever on what was the real expense run rate, because I don't have a handle on what it really was. And so I don't even have a comparison. And in a year, we're going to have a real comparison on whether our expenses are ramping up or whether we kind of come in high and our CUs basically have extra cash and we can kind of start coming down and get a real run on our expense rate, basically. And so it's just going to be a difficult ride until we figure out how that works. And, I look at the numbers, and the only thing that just seems kind of out of control is the compensation in Maker. The salary levels, they're high, but I think it's reasonable given the fact they're all contractors and have to pay a whole bunch of other stuff that if you're an employee, you don't pay. It just comes in as perks with your whole package. And so I really want to isolate, I also want to isolate future expenses against past, because there are people who are asking for stuff in the past. Like, let's just blanket this in two different ways versus mixing it up. And then I really want to isolate, what do we need in DAI as a salary to be competitive? And then I want Maker compensation as a bonus. And I've been working on this. Is what I want it to be is in relation to the amount of DAI the protocol earns as a net profit. I mean, literally, you can buy Maker with it, and then you could take some fraction of that Maker and slate it to burn or slate it for compensation. And then everybody's going to ask for compensation, and they'll have all these approved packages. Let's say that totals $9,000 a year, and you only made $5,000 a Maker. Well, then you portion out $5,000 a Maker into the $9,000 a request. So that way it's actually sustainable. And then when you bank more Maker, let's say the ask was 9 for compensation, you made $20K, you bank that Maker. So then you can kind of dole it out in the future. I mean, we have $84K a Maker as kind of our bank, but those are the kind of issues that, and the ways to approach it, in terms of how we're going at this. But in the loosest sense, I really want to trust the CUs. I'm really big on giving people authority and responsibility and seeing if they can manage the deal, and then looking at the whole CUs as our kind of secondary bank of DAI, because they're going to build reserves to manage their people into the future. That's all I got up there.
Excellent. That's a very thorough response. I'm glad that came off of such a muddied question. So thank you. Thought I saw someone unmuting, but it might have been David. Were there any other questions that popped up during that? Oh, Tim, maybe?
No, that was me. Yeah. I'd be remiss if I
Tim.
didn't say the delegates are trying to slam their heads together and solve some of these problems and think them through anyways. Some headways there. But I figure for the recording and for other folks, if you want to maybe sound off on your thoughts about delegate time commitment, not specifically compensation, I think that comes sort of afterwards, but there's a bunch of delegates who clearly are obsessed with Maker and really are like commenting on every thread. And there are other ones who aren't as aggressive. Like you said, you took a break. So maybe you can sort of sound off on your opinions about time commitments for delegates, et cetera.
Oh, that's a good one. So I actually have in my delegate platform, let me find it and read it because it was it's an important point. What did I say? Something like, yeah, without compensation at levels above my current employ, my ability to work will be limited to what is strictly necessary to steward over the Maker system, basically. So for me, I'm just going to kind of manage it against, I'm currently making, 6 digits, right? I'm an older professional. I'm not independently wealthy. If I was kind of independently wealthy, I'd be here and I would just manage my time according to whatever my time goes into. But I have to think about it in terms of my salary. So for me, it's like, Tim, we were talking a little bit in our, private chat. I like this idea that, a delegate kind of is a part-time job, that really the real demand shouldn't be more than a couple of days a week. And I think there's a number of us delegates, I want to write a proposal for an institutional vault thing. We're kind of bound. Some delegates are bounding on the work of CUs, right? And they're doing it with extra time. And I don't know how to handle that and much less compensate for it. But I think my job, like I said, was like to pace myself. I mean, I have a lot of ideas. I want to work on stuff. I really spend a lot of time on stuff that I want to finish. But I'm just like, son of a bitch, this is going to be a full-time job and I'm not going to get a full-time anything out of it. And so it just makes me, it leaves me in a tough place because I really want to do more. But then I'm just like, oh, the hell with that. I don't want to burn out and I really want to be compensated at an appropriate level if I do that kind of stuff. And I just don't know how to handle it because I don't want to be a delegate who goes to a CU and says, I'm not accepting your plan because I think there's a better one. I've done this in the past. And then they're like, well, then reveal your better plan, my friend. And I'm like, shit, you want me to put in another 40 hours to do your job? I mean, and that's a real hard place and a real hard thing to deal with. And I don't know how to deal with it other than what I've said, which is I think I'm just going to manage it as kind of a, this 1 to 2 day thing and really pick the places where I think there's important stuff and then figure out. And for me, I'm just going to log my time, so that at some point, maybe I can get compensated for my log. I did it with the grant that I did for the Black Thursday report. I mean, Rich was kind of like, dude, we got what you did for us was cheap, and he's right. And then basically for leading the committee, on compensation, it's like, yeah, I had 120 hours and 50 an hour. It's like all of those were way more than that. But, like I said, I've done a lot of free time in a lot of places just to try and help things be better. And so I kind of look at it that view. But, it was one of the reasons for burnout because I was really hoping to lower my full-time job hours and start sliding over into DAOs and potentially Maker. And that just never really materialized because Maker couldn't give me 100 plus an hour, at least at the time, and I don't know if it ever will. So I'm just going to manage it from that perspective, which is how much time do I really have to give and what can I do and what's the most critical and important and go from there. So, but inherently, I think the 2 day a week thing is kind of a rough idea of a good number for what I wouldn't say the minimum requirement, but I would say the mean result from delegates. I think some will be under that and the number will be over that, but the mean is probably on that order.
Excellent. Appreciate you sharing those thoughts and giving us some insight there. We are coming up on the end of the half hour here, so got time for maybe one more question. I'll look at my sheet so I can field it, but if someone in the call would like to present it, this is your last chance to do so.
I guess I should have the plug for my 1 trillion die MakerMan, back me and we'll get to 1 trillion safely, securely. And at 1%, 1 trillion makes us 10 billion. And then, we can have all kinds of CUs and people. Even 0.5% on 1 trillion is a good number.
I can throw out a question. Yeah, I've asked everybody else. I'm curious to get your thoughts on delegation. So like, I keep thinking about that story I always heard in grade school. I don't know if it's true or not, that George Washington said something had some warning about against political parties and all of that. And I keep thinking about that with the launch of delegation. And so I guess I'm curious, do you have any concerns about the implementation of delegation? Do you see any risks being introduced there that you're worried about, or what are your thoughts there?
Well, I have a friend who's I wouldn't say a professional politician, but he has been in politics. And what we're learning is that parties, they kind of suck. You can see the reasons for it, right? In terms of like how voting works, right? And that's kind of what leads to party formation, right? Is how do you actually get governance things to pass? And so, ideally, I had an idea a long time ago, sort of creating a different system where basically parties were not allowed inherently, that you had to stand on your own platform as a person, right? And then all you had to do was get enough support to be able to be considered as a delegate or for a political position, right? And if you got that sufficient support, you basically were in. And so inherently, it didn't matter. What mattered more was what your platform was versus whether you were going to gang up with a whole bunch of people and have a political power, house that can get things done. But when it comes to governance, you kind of want to get things done. And that's the question that I've kind of been wondering. It's like CUs are facilitators to get stuff through governance, right? I see delegates as the ones to kind of help accelerate some things. Like there's certain things that certain delegates might want. I mean, in one hive, there's a swarm idea that anybody can kind of do anything. And that's powerful in some ways, but it also has its own issues. And in Maker, delegates, I think, are there to tap on the brakes and to be the responsible system quality assurance, right? It's not our job necessarily to make the case to sell something. That's a facilitator's job or a stakeholder who has an interest in that. A delegate can do that, and there's a number of delegates that are kind of also in the CUs, right? And I wonder about that, whether it has its own conflicts of interest, but right now I don't see issues with it. But I just think these are interesting ideas to think about. In terms of parties, God, I hope we don't have maker delegate parties, like the R's and the D's. I just, that will sadden me. I'll be an independent, I think. And it's the way I've always been. I mean, I have a nickname in Discord, Rogath, and I tend to be my own player and want to stand on my own views. And I think it's something that's kind of sorely lacking in the world is people who can stand on a view, whether it's good or bad, and make their case. And my biggest issue is just people who have beliefs that you can't throw any data at them and they will change that belief. And that's my biggest problem is that, I might have a view and a lot of information. It might look like a belief. You throw enough data and arguments at me, I can totally change that view. And I think that's what's sorely lacking in politics and in general is people who have a backbone can actually look at data, stand up with real, tangible, logical arguments, but also be willing to change in the face of new data and better arguments, straight up.
Awesome. I feel this has been a super enlightening half hour and really appreciate you taking the time to let us know who you are and what you stand for there, MakerMan.
And I hope you guys will delegate some Maker to me. The few that are actually here, spread the word. And this is a good. I have my own video now. Thank you, Peyton and Maker. So that people can actually look at and listen to me and my platform and decide whether they want to delegate Maker to me. And I hope you do. And to that end, like if I can see what's coming up, I keep thinking about this delegate thing. It's like what I really want to do is kind of post my thoughts on votes before they come up. So that if anybody that's delegating to me, in my delegate thread, they can kind of make an argument, give data, right? If they think a view needs to be changed, and I'm sure we'll do that in threads. But I think that's important, and it's one of the things that I consider really important in my platform, and so I hope people think about that, and also that I will try to do that so that we can engage in discussion before I actually vote. And then even after, because things can always be changed. So anyway, that's it. Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, and as a final note, where can people who might want to engage on some of these topics, where best can they find you?
Okay, well, it's in my platform, so there's different ways to get a hold of me. Is in Rocket Chat, I'm MakerMan. In the forum, I'm MakerMan. And then I had, because I couldn't get MakerMan on email, I have Die MakerMan, DAI, right? It's double pun, right? And so it's in the forums, it's in Rocket Chat, or by email. So
Excellent. Well, thanks again, and I appreciate everyone attending. That'll probably close us out here. And yeah, by the time you're watching this on the YouTubes, MakerMan's delegate platform should be live on our voting portal. So if you wish to delegate some of your MKR to do that, should be easy going for you. Thanks again for attending, and I hope everyone has a great rest of the day.
thank you, everybody.
Maker down.